CBS News 24/7, fire and fury in some parts of Los Angeles. You know, some Angelinos went about their weekend no problem. But others saw protesters shutting down freeways, burning cars, and a lot of anger over immigration crackdowns. So let's talk about this. CBS News Justice reporter Jake Rosen is joining us now. Jake, take us through the National Guard deployment in California and why that's really creating state-to-state, federal-to-state issues and tension.
Sure, Reed. So we saw President Trump yesterday and late Saturday go through the motions to officially bring in 2,000 members of the National Guard from California, which has not been done in a context where a government of a state has not asked for it since the Civil Rights Movement, about 1965, I believe. What we really see here is the local officials, including Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass. Obviously, Gavin Newsom has been very outspoken about this for the entirety of the Trump administration, not just specifically in one incident, but that they do not want federal intervention, specifically on things like law enforcement, because given what is going on right now with these ICE raids across the state, and specifically in Los Angeles County, that are continuing, that he said going into this that he believes this would escalate tensions. It certainly looks like it did, just in terms of the crowds that we've seen at some of these protests. Gavin Newsom has said all along that he intends to sue the Trump administration over this mobilization of the National Guard. It's unclear specifically what that looks like so far, potentially more to come on that later today. But right now what we've seen is President Trump and his allies, including the FBI director, Attorney General Pam Bondi, you name it, the top law enforcement officials in the country, saying that they will not stand for what they see as an attack on police officers, while Gavin Newsom is saying they basically had this under control. Yes, it was certainly many blips on the radar and caused some big response from state officials, but they did not want the federal government to get involved because it results in more headlines, more protesters, and more violence.
Okay, so, we've seen in our country rallies, riots, response, and we knew very early on that you would see the comparison to the Capitol riots of January 6th to this, why National Guard troops were not called in. All of those questions remain. What is the conversation today as we start a new week on that point and through that lens, Jake?
Well, it's really from the not just 2021 and January 6th, Reed, but going back to what we saw in the summer of 2020, right, where there was this mass mobilization and full entire city blocks were burning, and the Trump administration eventually had to go in. That is just not what has happened so far yet in Los Angeles, despite what President Trump and his allies have claimed. There is no siege going on in Los Angeles. There is no full-on takeover, but it's hard to dismiss some of the images that we've seen in terms of how police have responded violently, and the rhetoric coming from the Trump administration saying, basically, you touch a cop, you assault the cop, we're going to fully prosecute you, in the context of what we've seen over the last 5 months or so from the president and his allies pardoning those who were involved actively in January 6th, ending the investigation into people who stormed the Capitol that day, and conversations that we know and have reported on at CBS that are still ongoing about fully pardoning the rest of people who did not fully receive that full pardon from President Trump. The images that you can see on your screen right now of people taking over federal buildings and there being no National Guard, there being a lack of military and response when that was an armed protest compared to what looks like, specifically in this case, yes, there are some people armed, but it looks like some agitators essentially tried to co-opt what was a peaceful protest.
Well, as we look back, we can also tell our viewers there's a right now angle to what is happening in the headlines. Jake, right now there's an anti-ICE protest that's happening right near the Justice Department, not far from where you are. This one involves a top union leader taken into ICE custody. Tell us what you know about this case as we look at these live images right now.
Well, you can see Free David and those signs in the background of the woman who is speaking. David Huerta is a union leader for the SEIU union. He represents about 750,000 people in that part of California. He was there, the union says, as part of a community observer to make sure that things did not get out of hand, right? Going back to that local angle of what we're talking about, a representative who is profound in the community, somebody who has made a difference. He was arrested and actually hospitalized as a result of that arrest. We know he's now out of the hospital. The Department of Justice has charged him with crime that could potentially result in 6 years of prison. It is conspiracy to impede an officer. We'll see whether they go through fully on maximum charges against him, but we're expecting an appearance later today in Central California, where he's likely to be put in front of a judge for the first time, as his attorneys will likely move for him to be released from custody, and obviously these activists are calling for the same. Certainly one high-profile arrest so far in this of a man who's not accused of any violence, but just conspiracy to impede. We should just emphasize that, getting in the way of law enforcement, right, Reed?
Well, and David Huerta is well known in the state of California, especially among farm workers in the state of California. Not only is his arrest headline making, but potentially for the Trump administration symbolic as well.
Yeah, and you have to remember that the target of a lot of these ICE raids obviously are undocumented workers. These ICE raids are not just kind of cruising units that have gone to target people specifically now. It looks like specifically in this part of California in Los Angeles County, these raids were targeted at businesses where there could be more than one illegal immigrant who is working there or around that area. That really was the center of this, of people who were showing up for immigration hearings and then being detained. We've seen the U.S. attorney told me late Saturday night that these arrests are going to continue. They have no intention of stopping them, and somebody like Huerta is certainly dead in the middle of this in terms of fighting for immigrant rights in addition to workers' rights, as the Trump administration has taken on both of those.
All right, Jake Rosen in Washington, thank you so much. And you know, we've heard a lot from President Donald Trump on social media regarding all of this unrest in our country and also in the state of California. We can also tell you, Jake, and our viewers at home that the president just arrived at the White House. We expect he is going to have something to say about these cases very, very shortly. Jake Rosen, thank you so much for reporting from our nation's capital on CBS News 24/7.